Hey, welcome back to YT Finance, and this is the channel where I went to business school so you didn't need to, and today we are talking about Nano Dimension's NNDM stock because recently their earnings report came out. So in this video, we're going to be going over the latest price targets for the stock, what their earnings report says about their earnings per share as well as their revenues, the future projections for the NNDM stock price, and if Nano Dimension is a good buying opportunity right now. For more videos like this one, remember to go and smash that like button right now, subscribe if you are new, comment your thoughts down below about Nano Dimension stock, and without further ado, let's jump right into today's video. So I did a video yesterday about Nano Dimension, and we were talking about how the recent increase in their stock price right here was unnecessary and nothing really caused this. So I referred to this run up as a pre-anticipatory run before their earnings report because there was no news about Nano Dimension that would cause the stock price to surge. And like how I predicted in that video, it would surge up in anticipation. However, after the earnings report, which we can see right here, the stock price was going to trend downward, and that is exactly what happened. You can even rewatch the other video that I posted, and I actually warned about this happening. I even said this could happen even if they had a good revenues beat, which they actually did in their earnings report. However, their earnings per share, or EPS, came in very negative. Now, this is not to say that Nano Dimension is a bad company inherently. However, when we go over their earnings report and what the CEO said to shareholders, we will discuss if we should continue to hold on to Nano Dimension. Also, if you didn't know, I am no longer invested into the NNDM stock. I have liquidated and actually took profits right here because my average price was low enough to where it surged up. I ended up taking profits, and I actually took these funds and I invested it into PRNT, which is an ARK Invest ETF that covers a wide variety of 3D printing and additive manufacturing stocks, which actually includes Nano Dimension. So it's not like I don't own any Nano Dimension. I do own Nano Dimension indirectly because I own ARK's PRNT ETF, which spreads my risk out among a plethora of companies. Instead of just betting on Nano Dimension, I'm going to bet on the entire 3D printing and additive manufacturing industry, and to me that's just a lot safer. I also think that it's trading at a fantastic discount right now, and that's why I decided to take profits on this play and then invest into the PRNT ETF. However, for those of you that are still in Nano Dimension, let us go over the latest news and the latest developments, particularly revolving around their earnings report. So if you didn't know, Nano Dimension is a 3D additive manufacturer of electronic devices, and they are an industry leader in this regard. Their ticker symbol is NNDM, and they are known for their printed electronics and their micro additive manufacturing technology. And recently, as in today, they actually released their full year 2021 financial reports on top of their fourth quarter 2021 results. And these have been officially audited, and I've looked over them, and we have some good and bad news. And just like what we saw in the stock price, we had a mixed result, however, that still led to investors liquidating their stock. So let's determine if this is an overreaction or not. Well, according to the audited results, particularly pertaining to their revenues, they brought in around $7.5 million worth of revenue in the fourth quarter. This would represent a 280% increase if we compare the fourth quarter of 2021 to the fourth quarter of 2020. This would also be around a 460% increase if we compare quarter 4 of 2021 to quarter 3 of 2021. So overall, I really like this revenue growth rate, and I hope that they can continuously bring in more revenues quarter over quarter. With that being said, what was the revenue for the entire year? Well, for the full year of 2021, which ended on December 31st of 2021, Nano Dimension brought in around $10.5 million, which would represent an increase of around 209% compared to the full year of 2020. Hopefully, they can continuously build off of their current momentum for increasing their overall revenue. Now, I do want to put this revenue into perspective. So right now, they brought in around $10.5 million worth of revenue for the year. However, their market cap, or their market valuation right now, is around $900 billion. So the company right now is trading at an extraordinary premium, but we will get more into this later, because if we value the company based off of the cash and or cash equivalents that they have on their balance sheet, which is worth $1.355 billion or $1,355 million, then technically buying the stock right now is a good value play, because because they have more cash on their balance sheet than what the company is currently worth. And this gives investors safety. It signifies to investors that this company is not going to go out of business because with their massive amount of cash that they have on their balance sheet, they can sustain their cash burn until their revenues actually scale up to the hundreds of millions. And this would make the overall stock price appreciate in the future, but it really depends on how you value this company. If you're just looking at the PS ratio or the price to sales multiple, it is very bad in the sense that you are paying an extraordinary premium for a company that is only bringing in $10.5 million worth of revenue. However, on the flip side, if you value the company based off of the cash that they have on hand and what they are going to do with that cash in the future, the company is technically undervalued because, like I said before, the market capitalization is only around $900 billion, while the cash that they have on hand is $1.335 billion. So it really depends how you as an investor value this overall company. I also want to point out that the company is actually performing ahead of their initial projections, because the company literally grew their revenue by over 10 times from 2020 to 2022. And this is very bullish news that even surprised their management. So it's good to see that they are scaling revenue ahead of schedule. However, in my opinion, they will continuously need to do this so we can actually get some good profits from the stock. It also sacrifices opportunity cost for the investor. So why would we tie up capital to Nano Dimension in the short term when we could invest into other stocks that are appreciating right now, and then once Nano Dimension actually has increased their revenues to the point where they are generating over $100 million worth of revenue with a low market cap of around $900 billion, then we could take that capital and then invest into Nano Dimension instead of just parking some money in Nano Dimension and waiting year after year after year after year when we could have made money in other plays or even an index. However, this does come down to your personal goals. Unless you just want to buy Nano Dimension and forget it, that's also a good strategy. In my opinion, Nano Dimension's main competitive advantage is mainly due to their manufacturing machines that are self-learning and self-improving. And this puts them one step further to Industry 4.0 solutions, and it gives them a good competitive advantage in my opinion. The CEO also compares Nano Dimension to a biotechnology growth company that doesn't have the same amount of downside. This is to say that you are buying Nano Dimension prematurely, just like you would with a new biotechnology company, to what they will achieve in the future. And honestly, I would say that is a very fair comparison, except when comparing these two companies, I would actually say Nano Dimension is safer than a startup biotechnology company because of the amount of cash and cash equivalents that they have on their balance sheet, and they also don't have to go through things like FDA approval. The CEO goes on to say that Nano Dimension has a long-range event horizon. This means that they are targeting long-term investors. And if you want quick stock price appreciation or even steady stock price appreciation, this may not be the stock for you. Although the CEO and their overall management believes that their revenues will continue to grow steadily over time, it's not going to be so dramatic that it will cause the NNDM stock price absolutely to explode unless a short squeeze happens for the overall stock, which is not unreasonable to think. The CEO also says that the downside risk of this company is not very dramatic, which means that Nano Dimension is a relatively safe company if you want to hold this for the long term. So if you plan to hold this company for the next decade, it's not really on the verge of going out of business, even though they are not bringing in a lot of revenues, because they have that huge cushion of cash to fall back on. The CEO also wanted to console their shareholders by saying they will not issue or dilute any more shares, because the reason Nano Dimension has so much cash on their balance sheet is because they diluted shareholder value multiple times. But now that they have this lump of cash, the CEO is saying that they don't need to raise any more money for its development goals, and there will be little to no dilution anticipated from here on out. He also believes that their gradual growth of revenues and their earnings on a quarterly basis should invigorate and support investors' thesis in Nano Dimension that the company is improving, and I actually think we see this from their earnings report now. They have drastically increased their revenue, but I will talk about why their revenue actually increased, and it's mainly due to one of their acquisitions. The CEO also says that when you compare Nano Dimension to the other publicly traded additive manufacturers manufacturing companies or 3D printing companies, they have all lost a lot of market value. Up to 50 to 60% of their stock valuation has plummeted in the last 3 to 4 quarters. So it's not like Nano Dimension in isolation is the only 3D printing stock that is falling right now. A lot of them, about 10 of them, are also falling, which to me provides a good buying opportunity. But in my personal opinion, I am buying into all 10 of these companies and even more through the PRNT ETF instead of just betting on one of these companies, because I am betting on the entire industry, not just one company within that industry. This lowers risk and it also gives me good long-term price appreciation. The CEO goes on to tell investors that they are in a very good position right now thanks to their overall shareholder support and trust within the company, which has allowed them to attain that $1.35 billion worth of cash. But this begs the question, what are they going to do with all of that cash on their balance sheet? Well, he actually shows us the plan and tells us what this cash is going to be used for. So the first thing that this cash is going to be used for is research and development efforts to further their overall underlying technology, to both enhance their materials, 3D printing ink, as well as their overall 3D printing machines. Secondly, they're going to use it to attain more companies. So they are going to use this for M&A, also known as merger and acquisition transactions. And Nano Dimension has already acquired really good businesses such as NanoFabrica, DeepCube, Assemtech, and many others. But the CEO is not just going to dive into any random merger or acquisition. When they acquire companies, they want to make sure that they are attaining intellectual property from that company. So this is going to add to the overall IP and value of the underlying company. In our last video, we actually talked about the patents that they are trying to get approved and the 24 patents that they already have approved, 6 of these just coming from NanoFabrica alone. So through the acquisition, they are attaining intellectual property, which will help their overall technology. The CEO also talks about how many experienced investors are trying to focus on the value added by the overall company, particularly for the segment, sector, or industry that that company operates in. And he says because Nano Dimension is adding value, this will eventually be reflected in their overall stock price sooner or later. And I tend to think more later is going to be the more realistic target for Nano Dimension, although there is one analyst from Maxim Group that actually says that the stock could surge all the way up to $10 per share in the next 12 months. But of course, we should always take what analysts say with a giant grain of salt. Their management is also very excited for the future potential of their merger and acquisition targets, and they are actually currently in talks with other companies of potential acquisitions. This will further drive their research and development and make the overall company even more competitive, and this will raise their revenues, and I will talk about that literally right now. Like we mentioned earlier, the total revenues for the fourth quarter of 2021 came in at around $7,531,000, which is a huge increase in revenues from the amount of revenue that they brought in the third quarter of 2021, which was around $1.34 million. However, why did the overall revenues spike so drastically? Well, actually, this is due to their acquisition of Assemtech, which was purchased back in November of 2021. Now, what's the most shocking about this is their earnings per share. So the net loss for the fourth quarter of 2021 was $159,624,000, which means they had a net loss of around 62 cents per share. This is a huge loss, especially compared to their loss in the third quarter of 2021, where their net loss was only $18.24 million and they had a loss of around 7 cents per share. Even if we go back to the fourth quarter of 2020, their net loss was only 20 cents per share. So this is a substantial loss, and it's good reason why the current stock price fell, and it could actually even fall lower. Now, determining if this is an overreaction, I actually don't think so. However, overall, does this mean that Nano Dimension is a bad company? No, it does not. It just means that they had a really rough earnings report, particularly pertaining to their earnings per share. On the other hand, I would say that their revenues came in very positively, and if you don't want to invest into this company for the long term, you may be better off either tax loss harvesting and selling the company at a loss, or investing or using any profits to invest into the PRNT ETF, so you are not just betting on one 3D printing company, you are betting on the entire industry. But I would love to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think about Nano Dimension and the PRNT ETF? Subscribe if you're new, like this video right now if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next YT video.